good, everybody? Good morning. Good morning. It's your boy Joey JayPing checking in live, man. RespectMyRegion.com. Your boy's back with another Morning Joint podcast episode. This is the 107th episode, man. That's over 2 years of morning content around 8:30 in the morning, man. It's the cannabis industry, so you know we're out here being first. I got a very special guest today. We got Seth Yakatan, Katan Associates International CEO, founder, partner. He's also a strategic advisor for Glasshouse. I believe it's Farms or Group. I'm not sure on the actual branding there. But Seth, welcome to the show. This is our first episode. I appreciate you joining me. Good morning.
I am honored to be here, brother. Thank you for the line. Appreciate the time.
I very much appreciate it, man. We were just talking offline a little bit about your LinkedIn prowess and how you've been able to these words have a negative connotation in it, but it's infiltrate cannabis as a business guy, right? Because you got to think like a lot of these cannabis guys, they're legacy trappers, right? They're old school, they're OGs, and we've been saying, or at least on our side of this call, we've been saying this for years about how business in cannabis is a little different than business in the regular world, and you've been pivotal. Integral. You've been incredibly impactful at helping people maneuver the space, learn and get resources, and also helping people get money into their business. And so I wanted to chat a little bit today about your background, what you did before, what you've been doing, and I'm gonna take it a couple directions once you start sharing some stuff. How's that sound? Is that okay?
Yeah, cool. I love it. Thank you.
Dope. All right. So Seth, the title on today's episode is talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly sides of cannabis investing. And so you have a lot of experience inside and outside of cannabis, and I would love for you to share a little bit of information about who you are and what you've done inside and outside of cannabis.
Thank you. Well, I'm 54 years old. I've kind of been working since I'm 18, so I've been at this 30 years. I'm not retiring anytime soon, so I'm going to be around for another 10, 12 years for all you youngsters, so you're going to have to put up with me. For really, the first probably 12 to 13 years of my career, I was a professional investor, right? I worked inside a venture capital fund for about 4.5 years. I went back, I got an MBA. I then went inside a $5 billion fund that was a multi-strat private equity fund that was owned by a bank buying media telecom companies.
Wow.
So really, from just a nuts and bolts perspective, I kind of learned how to invest into a company, seed to like C, D, E stage, sell it, take it public, kill it. And then once you had something that was doing like 100 million in revenue, scale that to $1 billion or 2 billion or 3 billion and find somebody else to buy it. So like the whole waterfall and the mysteries around corporate finance and how money flows and what people expect in terms of returns of projects. I did dirt for 12, 13 years, banging models and doing that at the highest level. So, fundamentally, whether, I'm smarter than anyone else, that's a skill set, and that's a skill set that you can apply to a lot of things. And I've got that. So, the second stage of my career was really focused on life sciences. So, my story is about what other people have done for me. So, my dad, who's not with us anymore, grew up in an orphanage, became a really successful entrepreneur in biotech. In 2001, I started a consulting firm with him called Katan Associates that was really focused on therapeutic drug development companies. Still around, still have 2-3 projects that I do in that space. And same thing, we went into companies, figured out, how to get capital into them, how to scale them, how to sell them, how to shut them down. A lot of what we did was either partnerships, so getting a large pharmaceutical company to effectively license a drug like we would for a brand, going multi-state, had the same strategy in cannabis, taking them public, selling them. A lot of what we also did was what I call venture remediation. So, company VCA and VCB would both have a bad company, and they'd come to us and say, put these things together and get us out of it, which was usually take it public through a reverse merger. which is a lot of the way that most early cannabis companies went public. A lot of the bankers that are involved in cannabis are people that I've known back from my healthcare days, or at least the banks, specifically in Canaccord and AGP.
That's
So
that's pretty interesting because you got like how these regular world industries overlap. It's like these people were had professional careers, but they also had this personal interest clearly in cannabis on the backside, right?
well, here's why. Because once I was doing, 10 years trying to, raise capital for an idea, because that's basically what an early stage drug is, right? I have a molecule, it might work, but it's going to like $300 million in 10 years to prove that it works. I started looking at things that I thought were easier. So I got involved in a couple of sports neutral companies. So I'm still on the board of a decently sized NASDAQ listed company that's in that sector. I got involved in a couple of DTC, direct to consumer marketing companies that were involved in the consumer products or sports neutral products. And in 2012, it led me to the therapeutic application of cannabis. We had done 2 deals in terms of private companies that we ended up taking public, or public companies that we turned around. And a couple of my investors in those deals came to me and said, we think Canada is going to go wreck. And there's this company called GW Pharmaceuticals. And what we want to do is we basically want to clone it. So we just want to copy this company, and we want to take it public in Canada and do like a pump and dump.
Wow.
So
which,
I did.
Which for people think that that's a bad, like that's something bad in the space. That's business. People make a company to make a bunch of money with it to then sell it. In theory, like that is one of the dreams of building a business. No.
Look, up until that point, like my dream was I'm going to become CEO of a company. I'm going to get 10% of it. I'm going to take it public. It's going to be worth $100 million. I'm going to drop the mic and I'm done. Like, goodbye. You're never going to hear from me again. Right. And I did it. So I did it. I raised that company $43 million and took it public in Canada and got involved in 2 or 3 more. And
Yeah, that just sounds like just craziness and also fun because on my side, I have no idea what that physically looks like or mean. It just is like, oh yeah, $43 million. How do you go and raise that? So how does someone go and do that? Is it really as simple as asking around? Is it the right people, the right events? How does one go raise $43 million, brother?
It's it's serendipity. I like to try and make things simple because I don't believe that I'm fundamentally that smart. And a lot of analogies that I like to come up with are dating.
Mm-hmm.
If you start dating someone, why is it that you two connect and you start dating? Is it because you've gone on 700 dates, or it's because you've been on Tinder for a year, or it's because you bumped into somebody at a coffee shop and like kismet happened? It's a combination of all those things. So I can't tell you, I guess I can't tell you why it happens or how
But
it
that's
happens.
the recipe. That's the recipe.
Look, what I like to say to people is I have a process, right? And if I'm baking 10 batches of cookies, the process is kind of the same. I don't know if today everyone's going to want to buy the chocolate chip or the macadamia nut. Like, I just don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I've been able to get 3.2 transactions done a year for the last 16 years. So obviously there's something about my recipe that works.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if I have project A and project B, and project A is awesome and it should get done and it's amazing, and project B sucks, sometimes project B is the one that actually gets funded or sold.
Yeah.
And project A just like goes away, right? So that I don't know the why.
Yeah, it's obviously not a guarantee because you're kind of always, I mean, when we're talking opportunity meets serendipity, that's the right thing, right time, and timing is almost more important than the right thing being right?
Correct.
Yes.
100% correct. And I could show you that in 50, different industries. And that was cannabis. So just to loop it back to like the balance of my story. So, I got involved in, again, essentially like the therapeutic drug development side of cannabis. In 2019, I was trying to take a public company on NASDAQ. It failed. I had a founder who I was doing his second exit for, and I sold that company. And, I got to give props to two people in my life that you wouldn't imagine I would give props to. So my ex-wife, right? Going through the divorce process and being divorced for 14 years has taught me a high level of self-awareness. And that self-awareness is basically treat people the way that they kind of want to be treated, and don't always go in there like this, right? Don't always differentiate yourself somehow. And that is one of the reasons that I think I've been so successful in cannabis, is because most people who do what I do aren't necessarily likable, aren't necessarily people you want to go have a sesh or a drink with,
Yeah.
and are always coming back for the reach around for, hey, I need something. That's one thing. Somehow, and I don't know how, I do know how, a guy named Jason Pinsky, who again was a contact that I had going all the way back to early days in college, got on at ease. And I was partners with a guy named Nick Fasano for a long time. He's now running Can. And were it not for Nick Fasano, I would not be in cannabis. Full stop. So Nick Fasano convinced the guys at Ease to hire me, and the rest of my story in cannabis has been history.
Wow.
And it's really just kind of been treat people the way that they want to be treated. And moreover, just kind of get stuff done, and don't take credit for all the stuff that you didn't do. And those kind of two general, kind of fundamental theses work for me in cannabis, and has allowed me to build a lot of exceptional relationships. And for me, it all comes down to the quality of your relationships. So,
absolutely. People always say that just networking in general is relationship building, right? Sales is relationship building. It's just balance of being likable, relatable, relevant, and then actually really being helpful, right? And I think that that's something that cannabis, particularly in the last decade or so of adult use and legal, or some combination of medical meets recreational, whatever it is, people are just looking for genuine help and consistency, and for people not to disappear on them. I think it's kind of simple in that way. And that kind of, kind of echo you here to circle back to what this episode's about, is the good, the bad, and the ugly parts of cannabis investing. And one thing, there's a couple things that stood out in hearing a little bit about your experience outside of cannabis and getting into it, is that it hasn't been all wins. I literally heard you say you failed at a project there in the last minute or so. And so it's like there are plenty of ups and downs in the space. And so I wanted to go to start chatting a little bit about our first true topic of the day, which is the California cannabis scene, and really breaking down three parts. Who is doing good work, which I see you posting all the time, right? That's what made me think of that, of the good part of this. And then I want to talk about the bad, and you can give examples without giving names if you'd like. Myself, I like to name them. And then the ugly. Who has been horrific at this cannabis thing? And I think we've all seen some pretty big brands or glaring examples of maybe some of the ugly sides of this whole situation as well. And so I'd love to start. Let's just keep it positive before we get into the spicy side of things. In California cannabis specifically, I've seen you posting about some really, really good. They call it good actors and bad actors, but let's talk about, this is not acting for them. This is who they are. So who do you think in California is doing really good, great, or phenomenal work in terms of running a cannabis business efficiently in a scalable way, and whatever kind of qualifies to fit into that description for you?
I'm going to steal a line from a person that I jab with online. I'm wearing a hat that says Glass House, numbers just don't lie. So, read the annual report. It's one of the largest cannabis companies in the United States, and I think they're doing a lot of things right. Let's go down to smaller scale operators, because I think that's really where the root
Glass
of
House is the largest with it. That is vertical. They have the most canopy, the most product. They don't have the most stores, but they have the most product going the most places.
There are several investment banks that rate them as tier 1 MSOs, as a tier 1 MSO, and just based upon the market cap of the company, it's in that group. So that the scale that operation operates at is beyond, compare. So
Yep.
I'll lead with them.
So we'll leave the Glass House and
I'll lead
continue
with that
on
house
to
and
the
stop.
next one.
I think there's two companies that I do talk about a lot in the flower game. There's a group out of NorCal which is called A Golden State,
Mm-hmm.
which I think has some of the best quality flower I've ever seen. The two gentlemen who run it are amazing. Bear is a legendary grower who's known across the world for his genetics, and I think the quality and consistency of their flower is beyond compare. And I think that they really, really do it right. I'm going to give a shout out to my boy Jay Armstrong at Cali Lotus and Blem.
Yep.
The in a difficult environment, in a challenging market, they have defied all odds in the last year and probably become, based upon the data that he recently shared with me, maybe the number two flower brand in the state. So when all you hear
And
about
at
is
the highest price point.
at the high and at the best quality,
Yeah.
we could argue the best quality.
Yeah,
but at the best
there's
quality.
some balance between price and quality there. Both of them meeting up at the top.
But how about this?
Yeah.
If you look at the headlines and you say California's messed up and we can't make it and I can't get paid, here's a bunch of guys who came out of nowhere, who got to grow in Santa Ana, that all of a sudden in the last 12 months have taken over.
Yep.
Right. So
they're adding something like, I feel like I'm seeing them add like almost 50 to 100 retailers a quarter.
Yeah, I think I have some proprietary data that's been shared with me, but
shout out my guy Justin Armstrong, man, keeping me at least tapped in because
my man Jay, yo, I'm waiting for the drop off, son. I'm waiting for the drop.
Yeah, hey man,
I've been waiting for a delivery. I'm waiting for a delivery to the casa here, but I guess I can't do that. I'm just gonna keep giving you props. Because
it's all the growth. It's all the growth. There's too much growth, Seth.
Maybe you could show up with some samples for your boy. Anyway, but I think they're doing it really well. Another company, just to completely shift gears, that I'm going to talk about on the retail side. Lauren Carpenter at Embark. If no one knows who she is the biggest G in the space. They are probably, for my money, the best retailer in California, pound for pound. Their model is amazing. Their store ethos is amazing. Their selection is amazing. Every store I've ever been in from theirs is just top to bottom great. As an organization, I think it's really well run. What they've done on the on-site activation side of things is a lesson that any cannabis company should look at. So we talk about the triage and the torment of California retail, at Embark, and they're probably going to be 25 stores, by the first quarter of next year, let's say. My number might be off, but you have somebody who's continually expanding and growing and doing it right. And universally, right? Like universally in the ecosystem, everyone says, that's a great operation, and that's a great team, and that's a great company.
Yeah,
so,
definitely LinkedIn wide and in person. When you speak to the vendors, when you speak to brand ambassadors and bud tenders, staff, you watch online, they definitely are at that cream of the crop. Consistency for sure. Quality.
Yeah. There's another flower brand, and I'm just going to say traditional because those guys. What else needs to be said? I mean, you're talking about two of the biggest OGs in the game, and they're doing it right. And the quality and consistency of their flower and genetics is off the charts completely. Love what's happening there in downtown LA with them.
I'm gonna throw a couple other into the loop on the positive side, but let's switch to the negatives. Let's get a little spicy here. All right, Seth. This is what we got to keep it real. This is what we do. We got to keep it authentic. Be honest. I'm gonna throw two more groups into the mix. Well, technically this will be three, but it's kind of all the familiar. I want to shout out to the Cure Company, Originals, and Jungle Boys, because although they may not be the loudest groups, although they may not be the flashiest in terms of LinkedIn and all these other things, the Cure Company has quietly developed 5+ locations in California with their flower still available, and the Originals has also launched in other states, with Jungle Boys now at numerous, I believe, over 10 locations in Florida. with their stores still operational here in California. And so we're starting to see these brands that are vertical here in California not only expand to these other states, but clearly stamp out a footprint. Groups in like Originals there in Massachusetts, Calvin Johnson's brand, literally having all of their flower SKUs coming from Originals, Jungle Boys again with numerous locations. Just some really exciting groups. Now, to take it to a spicier direction, Seth, who are these brands that have already proven themselves to be bad at cannabis and doing a very ugly job at handling their money and operating efficiently? I got two that come to mind.
So who are you going to lead off with?
It's the largest publication meets product meets retail. High Times was flopped with whatever they were doing. It was a flop.
And MedMen, is that your second?
And then the MedMen, yes.
So let's dissect both of those, right? So, one of the things that you had kind of gotten to, but I wasn't able to extract from your comments. The most difficult thing about cannabis isn't the capital, okay? It's the fact that there's no playbook. So we have an industry that from a legal commercial perspective is maybe 10 years old. Fair?
Yeah.
So, if we're going to study it in business school, it's kind of hard to say what's worked because you can't define anything yet as really being a success. So you don't really have a model, right? So what happens? Legislators decide to allow cannabis. You can timestamp. I think all politicians are complete idiots, like every single one of them. Every single politician I've ever met is just not commercially savvy. That's why they go into politics, because they're crooks. And what they do is they decide to create a set of laws to govern an industry that will invariably change. So cannabis from inception is usually not set up correct from a legal and commercial standpoint. Let's just look at the tax regime in California. We could talk ad nauseum about how challenging and stupid and difficult that is. If you then take that into retail licensing, if you then take that into social equity, what you're usually given is you're given by the politicians a set of hopes and dreams to commercialize. And then when you get into it with taxes and with capital being challenging, you have a super constrained industry. So on top of that, you can't really say, well, if I do this, this is going to make me money.
Yeah.
So
it's a bunch of people with ideas hoping they're going to make money.
Correct. So when I go back to MedMen and High Times, right? MedMen really for me is the most disappointing story in cannabis, because you had the intersection, what we talked about earlier, of right thing, right time, right place. So they created the right entity at the right time, were able to capitalize on all of the momentum of the capital. In my opinion, they created, if not a national, a global brand, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
And
that New York location next to Saks Fifth, that's a global brand.
Global brand. And by any stretch of the imagination, they completely screwed it up because there was no adult supervision. They didn't know what they were doing. I don't want to say they were criminals, but they
a few individuals didn't turn out to be doing some of the right things all the time.
They didn't operate with a high level of fiduciary responsibility and integrity. And with all due respect to Adam, son, you don't go to Costa Rica for no reason. Okay, there's nobody that I know who's gone to Costa Rica for a good reason. So you don't go to Costa Rica because you can't live in the, right? Like, come on. So so at MedMen, I think you just had kind of like the classic startup issues. And it's a shame because, there are very, very few global brands in cannabis. Cookies is one of them. And, I just feel like that was probably one of Like you're going to get 2 or 3 opportunities as an industry to do something that monumental, and they kind of screwed it up, right? High Times is a comedy of errors, and my mom died of cancer, and I was her primary caregiver with my sister for about 6 months. And what I say to someone, when I talk about that, is it looked like I was watching somebody walk up a flight of stairs and fall back down 4 times. Like I'm going to get up and I'm going to fall back down. And that's kind of what High Times was. So like every time you thought something was going to happen, it fell back down the stairs.
Yeah.
And it is where it is. I don't want to say, let's just say the guy who ran that company, in my opinion, does not have a lot of professional integrity. And it's a shame because that's probably, again, outside of MedMen, from a historical basis, probably one of the most iconic and recognizable brands globally in the industry. I do playing inside baseball. I do know that there's a receiver that owns those assets, and I do think that those magazine and event assets will live to see the light of day again at some point. So,
Little
but
RMR exclusive for you guys watching. There we
little
go.
RMR,
Little set.
mark my words.
Little
But
set
but
exclusive. Let's go.
but both of those things kind of have a classic recipe, Joey, that I see in a lot of emerging growth industries, which is too much capital, not enough adult supervision. Right. So I've seen that. There's plenty of biotech companies.
I want to discuss that. I want to discuss that because part of the one of the topics on today's episode is the raising money experience, and we've touched on how access to capital is kind of difficult, but yet these two major entities, arguably the most globally recognized brands in the space. High Times is the most globally recognized brand in the space. Longevity. Old people have never heard of cookies. That's just what it is. But High Times and has reached young people and older. So it's just like they're the biggest. Cookies is probably second. But you got to think like when they've been able to raise money, and then you use this word adult supervision. What does that mean in the grand scheme of the raising money experience and this managing a company, poorly versus positively mindset?
Let's look at another industry. Do you know who Elizabeth Holmes is? Do we all? Okay, is that a name that everyone's going to recognize?
Break it down for people.
Okay, so Elizabeth Holmes was the CEO of a company called Theranos. If you haven't heard of it, it's probably the largest corporate fraud that has ever been perpetrated. She raised billions of dollars for a diagnostic technology that never worked. So different industry, different person, different set of investors. This human being convinced lots of really rich, wealthy, smart people that her product was going to work and her idea was going to work and the quality of her conviction was going to work, so much so that she fudged data to continue to perpetuate that myth. Not enough adult supervision there. So if you're in a company and either you're lying or you're making it up or you're in control so much of things from an operational perspective that you can do things that are
there's no balance.
There's no balance. So if you look at I'm involved in a company right now that I'm on the board of where it's $100 million revenue company, and the human being who's been running it has been running it like it's his own dry cleaner, meaning like I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. Well, guess what? The board stepped in and the board has said, no, you got to put in processes and controls and SOPs and checks and balances. You're just not going to go run a $3 million project because you want to. Mm-hmm. So at a company like a MedMen or at a company like a High Times, when you've raised that bolus of capital, if you don't have a fiduciary responsibility or the fiduciary discipline to say what is the right thing, because ultimately and taking other people's money, you have, sometimes a bad result.
Yeah.
Right. So when you talk about what I say is adult supervision, if you're not a good steward of capital, you're just not a good steward of capital. Sometimes you can be a really good steward of capital with a bad idea and it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Sometimes
Better
you
to
can
have the money in the bank versus not in the bank,
correct. I'll tell you a story
especially if
about
it's borrowed.
I'll tell you a story about a company that I was involved with Australia that had raised $40 million to go run a phase 2B trial for its drug. The phase 2A didn't work. They were left with 25 million bucks. They gave the money back to their investors. They said, "This isn't going to work. We're going to wind down the company."
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go back to your themes: good, bad, and the ugly. Right. So we talked about the good. We talked about the bad. You want to talk about the ugly?
I do. I would love to. The last part of this is about the brands and businesses making the right moves, but it's more about across America, because I've seen you start to, not just talk about California cannabis. I've been noticing you're obviously watching the market as a whole and these brands across this country. And so I'd love to talk about some of the good and across the country, just to highlight some people real briefly. And then let's definitely let's break into the groups not doing such a great uh, such
So,
great.
so, so, so there's probably 3 or 4 companies that I'll talk about nationally. Two are brands. I talk about them endlessly.
Mhm.
I will talk about them endlessly in Timeless and Grune edibles.
Yep.
So, Timeless, those are my guys. Gonna, sneak preview. There's another post coming out on them on Thursday. I think they're probably one of the best run private companies that I've ever experienced in any industry, and the legacy understanding of customer and product market fit and how to replicate what they're doing in certain states is amazing. And their ability to maintain pricing hegemony at the top tier of that vape category, at this point seems, I don't want to say unassailable, but seems to be pretty steady.
Yeah.
Stizzy's coming in and discounting in a way that I've never seen before. I don't know how it's happened in California. I don't know how that's gonna play out in Arizona and Missouri, but it's coming. And I think that company, meaning Timeless's ability to land and expand in 6 or 8 states, has just been amazing to watch. Same thing with Grune Edibles.
We just
Christine.
launched in Jersey.
Yep.
Yep.
Christine and Draper, who I'm really close with, they're amazing operators. I think Draper is one of the best corp dev, biz dev, corporate finance guys that I've met ever in almost any industry. He's wildly connected, and he's running that company with her well. I think she's a phenomenal entrepreneur and an amazing story and a motivating person. Every time I'm with her, I just get jacked up. And the quality of their product is amazing, right? They have this basically jawbreaker size 100 milligram gummy that just rips everywhere they go.
I love the tubes with the tens,
Yep.
and they got different cannabinoid ratios. Man, Grune definitely does great work. Shout out them making a brand that I said wrong for 3 years straight before I learned how to say it about
There
2
you
years.
go. Another company that I will not stop talking about is my man Derek at Nova Farms. Those guys are just taking it over. And every MSO, look out, because Derek is coming for your lunch and your customer, and he's going to eat it and he's going to take it. So when they're leaving your parking lot and they're going to the Nova Farms parking lot, and I'm waving at you from the parking lot, you can come over and give us an LOI and a term sheet, because you need to buy at Nova Farms, because they're just going to lunch you, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
And
they had a
you
really impressive booth over there at Nican, New Jersey.
not to mention you talk about the connection to authenticity and legacy.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few companies that I think get that balance right. You're either really corporate or you're really legacy. And I think Grune has a really interesting form factor, but when you look at Timeless and you look at Nova, also the guys at Illicit Gardens, my man John Bond, I will not stop talking. Oh, sorry, I won't stop talking about him. But that balance between, yeah, we can do the whole. Hold on, we'll get it over with.
I didn't know that would happen on this.
Yeah,
That's
I
crazy.
know. But when you look at that balance between like legacy and corporate,
Yeah.
those are three companies that just nail it, man. They
Yeah.
just nail it. Those teams.
Cool
You know,
brands, great product, award-winning items, the data that supports it, retail activations, community events. Illicit sounds cool. Grown is delicious.
dude, let's go back to illicit. That tape deck case that they have for those pre-rolls, that's probably the most innovative packaging I've seen period in almost any industry. Like that had to me the appeal of like your first iPhone unboxing. You're like,
Yeah.
what is this, right? Um, so it's that in the good, right? There's probably three things that in all of those good companies are omnipresent, right? Quality product. All the good companies that we've talked about, what are we talking about? We're talking about the fact that the product is amazing at some level, right? So
Mm-hmm.
quality product, number one. Number two, know your customer. Know your customer. I'm also going to drop, some data exclusive from Hoodie on Friday talking about understanding customer, right? So all of those companies completely understand who their customer is. And the third thing is let's make decisions as fiduciaries that make money. We have 6 projects. Is this going to not make money? No, let's not do it. Is this going to not make us money? Let's not do it. Is this going to make money? Let's do that. So all of those companies kind of have this discipline of let's not make a lot of decisions that we hope are going to make us money. Let's make decisions that we know are going to make us money from day one.
Mm-hmm.
Because if we're not able to make money and pay our taxes, we're not going to be viable long term. And, going to the ugly or the bad, I think because there isn't a playbook, I think a lot of cannabis operators have historically raised money based upon the hope or the expectation or the assumption that we're going to turn into profitability or that, our initial pricing for, pounds is going to stay up at this level. And they just haven't built businesses that are constructed to make money day one. And for me, that's probably the biggest problem in the industry because it's also really hard to do that. Right.
A lot of these companies planned for a future that wasn't necessarily sustainable, right? COVID changed the dynamic of a lot of different parts of the country. Legislation started significantly changing, and I would say the velocity in which things started to rapidly just go through changes, from a state by state standpoint. Like there's all these different rules, the capital, the banking. We went through another round of payment processing and credit card problems in the last 8 months. It's certainly not been easy, and it tends to come in waves of challenges, right? They say things come in threes, right? Like there are definitely a never-ending amount of issues that continue to arise with cannabis, and these challenges, you got to be nimble.
So you want to talk about the ugly?
Let's talk about the ugly. Who do you feel is doing an absolutely ugly job here in cannabis?
I think there's 2 companies in California that have been on my ugly list, and I don't think it's because they're doing an ugly job. I think it's just because they have way too much debt. And that is State House that I have like publicly prognosticated going under for a while. And I don't think she's doing a bad job, and she just raised money. But Gold Flora is another.
Mm-hmm.
So when I look at those 2 companies and I say, you're not making any money, and you have way too much debt, and you don't really have any fundamental assets, you're just kind of pouring water from cup to cup.
Yeah.
Something's got to give there. And so I don't want to say they're ugly because they're not doing a good job. I
But
think
the situation they're in is not necessarily the most attractive.
listen, man, again, I'm going to tell you I'm not that smart, but when 1 and 1 equals 97, right? or when 2 and 2 equals negative 97.
Yeah, in this case, it's negative, right?
The math don't math. So, I think Ed Schmaltz, who's the CEO of State House, is a wonderful guy. I love, some of their stores. I love the deal that they did. But, when you got 100 million in revenue and you're not making money and you got $90 million of debt, something's got to give. And Lori Holcomb at Gold Flora, honestly, I think she's one of the better CEOs in the industry, right? She's really gritty. She really understands the market. She really understands her customer. She's done a great job with this Gremlin launch. She just raised $7-8 million to kind of kick the wolves knocking at the door down the road a couple of months. But again, when you look at that company and there's not a lot of assets there and it's losing money, and you got $35 to $50 million of debt that's coming due, it's kind of like, okay, that's just a bad hand,
We're all wondering what's going to happen with some of these groups that expanded so aggressively and had some of these deals a couple years ago, and now things are coming back around, and again, that reality is not the same that it was.
No, I mean,
the projections weren't necessarily on track.
You're going up against Russia and you got a pocket knife, right? Like, it's just too hard. Another company that I put in that box, and again, I think the CEO is really smart, and one of the companies that they bought in Ireland, those two guys are some of my people that I think highly of. But when you look at Forefront, as a company, and what they did historically with that asset in California and where they're at and the debt recap that they've done, I think that's something has got to give there. I also think Jushi is another one where, they've got a bunch of seller paper coming back on a lot of the retail that they bought. Sorry, Schwaz. And, when you look at something's got to give there. One of the interesting things about cannabis, going back to our earlier issue, is that because there's not a high level of sophisticated institutional investor that have been doing this for a long time in the industry, and because you don't have the clearing function of an efficient public market or bankruptcy, okay, I think our industry perpetuates these zombies longer than other industries do, because in some industries, what would happen is creditors would come in, they'd force bankruptcy, they'd throw everybody out, they'd get rid of assets.
So you're saying those companies, you're referring to those last few companies as walking dead, like zombies, because they're still alive and they shouldn't be around, because traditional people that normally would just kind of force whatever to just happen. So we just go through more waves and go through the layers. You just got to rip it off sometimes and get to the next. It's just not happening because we don't have the players in the space.
It's not that cannabis companies are inherently going to be zombies or non-lives, because you don't seem to have the efficiency of a public market to regulate value, right? You don't have a super group of sophisticated institutional investors or private equity guys to come in and take it over, and the ones that are left are kind of like saving their chips. Like,
I see.
Again, no disrespect to Matt Hawkins, I think he's one of the brighter guys in the industry, but like Entourage Effect Capital and Merida Capital and a bunch of the people that were really, really, really early to the space and put a lot of money to work, they're not viable anymore. So like, in another world, if you're a $500 million fund and you're going to raise your next fund and you want to prune stuff in your portfolio, you've got a team that's going to go in there and max. You don't have the capability to do that in cannabis. And then you also don't have bankruptcy, right? So look at High Times. Why is High Times still floating around the bowl? Because it's gone into a receivership. And because in bankruptcy, what happens is all the claims are flushed and you can basically go take over a clean asset. Right? It might be a distressed asset, but it's clean. In High Times, if you go to the receiver and you try and buy High Times, there's a bunch of boogers hanging off that thing, right? Like, and if you're going to buy it, you're going to buy it boogers and zombies and shit that's going to come after you in 4 years and all, because they're just saying, hey, we can't bankrupt it. We can't take it through a federal process where you can get a clean, look at the asset. If you're going to buy it, you're going to buy it like warts and all. And that doesn't exist in other industries, right?
That's crazy. That's crazy to think about. I mean, that literally presents exponentially more challenges and skeletons in the closet, like this blind risk in a lot of.
100%
It's
makes
wild.
a really thing that much harder. Which also, let's talk about the good. That's the opportunity, brother. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because
Yeah.
it's coming. It's coming. We all know it's coming. I can't tell you when it's coming. It might come it might come in January. It might come in January of 2030, but it's coming. And the size of our market is so large that every single alcohol, beverage, tobacco, CPG, wellness company on the planet, and probably luxury goods company on the planet needs to come look at this industry because
Yeah.
it's growing faster than their industries are, and it has a higher consumer share of wallet than their industries do. And once that unlock comes, forget it. Forget it. It's going to make 2014 to 2016 look like kindergarten kickball.
Hey
And I've
man,
said, and I've
from
said,
kindergarten kickball to the future, man. Seth Yakatan is out here helping us understand cannabis investing. Today's episode, everybody, was about the good, the bad, and the ugly in cannabis, specifically in California, North America, and in certain cases globally. Seth, man, I really appreciate you being on today's episode. For those of you guys watching, today's conversation was powered by Seedless Media. You guys can visit seedless.media in your search browser to learn more about the cannabis industry's premier marketing agency, SEO, cannabis, text messaging, loyalty, programmatic, you name it. They do it, and they have case studies to prove it. That's the first time I've ever floated like that. Shout out to Seedless. Seth, again, thank you so much for being on today's episode. 107 we've done now. And I look forward to more with you. For those of you guys watching, like, follow, subscribe, talk some shit, do what you got to do. But if you need to learn about cannabis investing, you guys need to tap in and subscribe and follow and connect with my guy, Seth. SETH space YAKATAN. Yakatan is the name. We will see you all on another episode. And I'll be tapping in with Seth at Chicago for the Benzinga Cannabis Capital Conference. We'll be learning a little bit more then. Things are going to change between now and then, Seth, so I'm excited for that convo. It's going to be a great one. Seth, Benzinga is always a good time.
I love it.
Seth, you have anything else for the people before we get you on out of here?
Just follow me on LinkedIn. You know, that's where you can find me. I'm there 4 to 5 days a week. I think at this point, I probably have one of the loudest voices in cannabis on that platform, and I'm doing everything I can to make it the loudest and louder. So just appreciate the support, appreciate the love, appreciate the time, appreciate being here. And you know, if you're not on him, get on my man Joey, because he's probably one of the realest around, and just love the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate y'all. You guys, tap